Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is the last Wednesday in June. Thank you guys all for being here. Welcome to offthehooksports.com. Caleb Calhoun, I am hosting the show solo today. Jaru will be back with us for a segment tomorrow. Hopefully we can have Josh Ward on then too, and then we'll have Jaru for the full show Friday. Today we're going to have Fred White at 10:25. So Fred's here helping me out today. Really appreciate him doing that. I know he's got a lot of things going on. Rocky Top Tom, good morning to you. We got a lot to get to, an impressive show. Good morning to you, Travis. We've got another coach ranking with Josh Heupel. We have an interview with Paul Finebaum where he said some interesting things about Jeremy Pruitt and integrity. NCAA and betting standards, that's kind of becoming an issue for them. And also with Fred, I want to talk about an anonymous coach not being too nice to Joe Milton. And on a tragic note, we'll do this in this first segment. We're going to remember Ryan Mallett, who tragically passed away. There is a Tennessee football connection there, believe it or not. And it's not to the death, but to Ryan Mallett specifically. And we're going to look back on that. It was a horrible story. Rest in peace. We're all thinking about his family. So I just wanted to get that in there. But before we get to that, let's dive in and let's talk about some coach ratings because it's the all season and we love coach ratings and we love top 10 lists and things like that. But this is an interesting one. A coach rating index, which is it's developed by Matrix Analytical. It's Matrix Analytical's coach rating index. They use actual data points to determine the 10 best coaches in college football. Now, what they do is they take into account the actual talent that you have, and then your actual strength of schedule, level of competition, and the results you produced on the field. Obviously, recruiting is a big part of coaching, so that's left out of here. But this just looks at how good of a coach you are and your effectiveness at coaching, and it takes a ton of different things into account. It's probably the most effective way of determining who's the best in-game coach out there right now. And believe it or not, Josh Heupel came in at number 9. Honestly, I was a little shocked it was that low. According to 247 Sports, Brandon Marcello, 247 Sports, posted this coach rating index, which they provided to 247 Sports exclusively. And it's written that Heupel enters his third season as head coach of Tennessee after winning 11 games last year and his incredible run at UCF. His high-octane offense has led to 3 10-win seasons. He's 46-16 overall. We all know about that, and then the passing efficiency and the success of that. His star rating is at 4.5, which is pretty good. 5 stars is 90 to 100. 4.5 is 80 89.9. So, and 4 stars is in 70 to 79.9. So he's in the 80 to 89.9 range, which in college is a B. He's just ahead of Jeff Brom at Louisville, who I do believe is a very, very, very good football coach who has maxed out what you can do at Purdue, and I think it's a danger at Louisville, can be very good. Just ahead of Heupel is Hugh Freeze. Now, remember, guys, this is not a character thing. This is not an integrity thing. This is not a you might get your program in trouble and get fired thing. This isn't a recruiting thing. This is just your ability to coach on the field. And there's no doubt that Hugh Freeze is a pretty good on-field coach. I mean, he did beat Nick Saban twice. Straight about coached Nick Saban twice. What he did at Ole Miss was very, very impressive. Just ahead of Hugh Freeze, shockingly, Chris Kleiman, Kansas State, comes in at 83.88 with the score. By the way, I should point this out. Hugh Freeze at 82.01, Josh Heupel at 81.12. Okay, so Chris Kleiman at Kansas State comes in at number 7. Really has carried the program beyond Bill Snyder, and you kind of have to give him a lot of credit for that. And so he has really maximized talent. I don't know if there's another level at Kansas State. We haven't seen it yet. We never saw it with Snyder, although Tennessee did almost play Kansas State in the national title game in 98, as we remember. Ahead of all of them, Jim Harbaugh at Michigan is number 6, 85.35. This is results-based, but I do believe it's also – well, okay, so Harbaugh recruits well. But I do believe there's an overachieving factor here because he hasn't recruited at a top 5 level until this year, and he's gotten Michigan into back-to-back college football playoffs, Big Ten championships. So Harbaugh, I'm shocked, is not higher. Dabo Swinney at Clemson, 90.54. That's results-based and solely results-based. I know he's brought in a lot of talent, and there's not a lot of competition in the ACC, but you still can't argue with. Sometimes the results are so great you can't argue with them, even on an analytical basis. Now, the flaw in this, again, because it's so results-based and it doesn't take into account things that were inherited, is Ryan Day at number 4 at 93.38. I find Ryan Day to be massively overrated, as many of you know on this show. I think he's got a lot to prove. And so I don't think Ryan Day should be on this list. It's not taking into account what he's inherited and how he hasn't taken to the next level. The top three are not too surprising. Lincoln Riley is number 3 at 94.26. Josh Heupel is Lincoln Riley Circuit East. They run the same offense, and Lincoln Riley's doing it at USC. I think he's going to get a national championship before long. Number 2 is Kirby Smart. Number 1 is Nick Saban. Yes, they recruit a lot, but their success you really can't argue with. Shocking to me was that Brian Kelly was not on this list. And I'm waiting for Travis to say that this is my LSU homerism coming out. But Brian Kelly I think belongs on this list. I think getting Notre Dame to the playoff, I think we undersell how much you can do. We overrate how much you can do at Notre Dame. Again, this is where they take into account talent and level of competition. And Notre Dame, relative to talent, Brian Kelly did pretty much hit par. But then there's also the drawback of what you can't factor in, which is the fact that they have a much more difficult level of coursework for players at Notre Dame than other schools, which is why they always lose the week of midterms. Good morning to you, Smoky Mountain Red. Travis says after Tennessee drops Georgia at Neyland, that all changes. Rocky Top Tom, you said you've been to some Georgia games at Neyland that Tennessee dropped and should have won, and been to some that definitely not supposed to win, but they shocked him. Yeah, I think I've seen more Tennessee shocking upsets over Georgia on the road, believe it or not. 92 Fulmer's interim game, that was a shocking upset. 2004 at Georgia, that was a shocking upset. One of the most shocking ones, not a shocking one, but in 98 when Tennessee blew Georgia out. Guys, go back and look at that game. Georgia was actually favored in that game. It was the week after Jamal Lewis went down for the season-ending injury. Travis, you said you take Heupel 100 times over Freeze and Kleiman of KSU. Okay, I'm with you on that, but I think you also have to take into account, again, this is solely just measuring results and talent. And Hugh Freeze has done a pretty impressive job on those things, despite all the other issues. Ryan Day's proven he's going to beat Youngstown State every year. Rocky Top Tom, that's pretty good. And I agree, Rocky Top Tom, Kelly belongs. Also, good point, Chip Kelly. Shocking that he's not in there. So that kind of threw me off. That's a good point. I will say, looking back on the Georgia games, Rocky Top Tom, the 24-3 comeback in 2015. Yeah, that's a good one. So, but as far as Josh Heupel being number 9, I think what's holding him back from being a little higher is the regression that happened at UCF in 2019 and 2020 after going undefeated and then 10-3 and then 6-4. This can't factor in the COVID year. It can't factor in injuries or things like that happened, and that's what's really hurting Heupel. So overall, I would say that this rating index is not the most effective way to measure the best coaches, but it's an intriguing thing to look at, and it's intriguing to think that Josh Heupel is a top 10 coach. And again, I think they got some right. I think in terms of just coaching on the field, Jeff Brom, Hugh Freeze, and Chris Kleiman are top 10 caliber on those. I mean, they really do a good job, guys, given the talent that they are dealing with. So I think it's really hard to sit there and say that this list is totally inaccurate. But here's some things you can't quantify with coaches when you just look at recruiting versus success on the field. You can't quantify what they inherited, and also level of competition, which this takes into account. You can't quantify what they inherited. That's a knock on Ryan Day. You can't quantify the exterior factors surrounding the program, whether you're at Notre Dame and your players have to have the same academic schedule as everybody else, whether you're Josh Heupel and you take over a program on probation, whether you have massive numbers of injuries. None of those things can be quantified to the level that they need to be for this to be a fully accurate list. You can't even quantify, quite honestly, and when people talk about recruiting, you can't even quantify how easy or hard it is to recruit in certain areas. I mean, that's a big part, but that's not as much of a factor here. But in general, this is why, if I were doing a coach rating index, I would look at the recruiting potential of that program. I would look at the success on the field. I would look at the level of competition. I would look at injuries. I would look at what was inherited. I would look at if there's any exterior factors, probation, NCAA, things that drive people away, and things that distract the program, and academics. All of that matters as much as recruiting, scheming, and everything else. So at the end of the day, Josh Heupel, still a top 10 coach, still pretty intriguing that he's on that list. The shocking ones are Brian Kelly and Chip Kelly not being on the list. If you guys think anybody else belongs on the list, let me know. I can't really I guess maybe you could have said that it's shocking that James Franklin's not on the list, but I don't think that's that shocking, quite honestly. And so I think this list pretty much didn't get it right, but they got most of the people right on the list. And if Josh Heupel has another year like last year, I think he's going to move up this list pretty fast because Tennessee still hasn't recruited at the level they need to be at. And so you have to give Josh Heupel credit on that front too. Now, will Josh Heupel take a step back? If he does he fall off the list? That's going to be intriguing because then, again, it can't quantify the amount of departing talent, returning talent, long-term trajectory of the program. All of these things matter when you're looking at a head coach, all of them. And you can't just take one thing. We're going to start our sports history portion of this show, of our YouTube channel pretty soon, where we're going to dive into historical stories surrounding Tennessee football and actually hopefully go beyond that one day. And I'm going to break in, one of the first ones I do is I'm going to dive into what made Robert Neyland so successful at Tennessee. And it wasn't one thing. There was a confluence of things, some that had nothing to do with him, some that did, some that had to do with his knowledge of things beyond football. So we're going to take all that into account. There's so many factors that leads to a coach or a program being successful. And I think the program has as much to do with its success as a coach, depending on the time. I think in the 90s, Tennessee football as a program was behind Fulmer's success a little bit more. Not that Fulmer didn't have a lot to do with it. I'm just saying there were a lot of advantages Tennessee had. Okay, moving on. I want to talk about this tragic story. And I don't know if you guys saw, but former Arkansas quarterback Ryan Mallett died in an apparent drowning in Okaloosa County. That's over by where Destin is in Florida. He was 35 years old. Mallett played at Michigan in 2007 under Lloyd Carr. After Lloyd Carr stepped down, Mallett transferred to Arkansas, played for Bobby Petrino, helped really build that program during the Petrino years in 2009 and 2010. Left early for the NFL, played for the Patriots, the Texans, the Ravens, had quite a few starts, I think mostly for the Texans. Just a really, really tragic story, and our thoughts and prayers are obviously with Mallett's family. The reason I bring this up is Mallett, interestingly enough, has there's a weird Tennessee football connection with Ryan Mallett. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but in 2007, right after that year, Tennessee had just won the East. Eric Ainge was graduating. David Cutcliffe had taken the job at Duke. Tennessee was in the market for an offensive coordinator. Now, Michigan and Lloyd Carr had just parted ways, and Lloyd Carr's staff had parted ways too, as Michigan had gone after Rich Rodriguez. Mike DeBoard, who became Tennessee's offensive coordinator, interestingly enough, 8 years later, under Butch Jones running the spread, was a pro-style coach around that time. DeBoard was very, very adaptable to different offensive schemes. It was very possible that Tennessee would have brought in Mike DeBoard to replace David Cutcliffe. If you guys don't know this, Mike DeBoard actually coached Tom Brady. So Tennessee has had the offensive coordinators that coached Peyton Manning and Tom Brady in college. Yeah, Mike DeBoard coached Tom Brady. He was there when Michigan won their national title in 97. Guy was very well respected. We talk about Dobbs saving Butch Jones's career. But part of that, what helped was Mike DeBoard was there in 2015 and 2016 too. And when DeBoard left, the program sank. I bring this up because Ryan Mallett could have ended up at Tennessee when he hit the transfer portal in 2007. Had Fulmer hired Mike DeBoard as offensive coordinator, it seems very, very likely that Ryan Mallett goes to Tennessee as the quarterback at that point. What does that mean? Well, we don't really know because 2008 was still there. And in 2008, does Jonathan Crompton have more success with Mike DeBoard as head coach than Dave Clawson? Possibly. And so that's very, very intriguing to look at. How would Mike DeBoard handle Jonathan Crompton? He clearly is pretty good with quarterbacks with big arms. Ryan Mallett had a big arm. Does Fulmer do enough in 2008 to stay afloat? I don't think he goes 5-7, but if he goes 7-5, 8-4, does he still stay afloat through 2009? If you got Ryan Mallett coming in, I think maybe you do. And then say 2008, 2009, maybe Jonathan Crompton still holds the job as a senior quarterback. So the question really becomes 2010. Does Fulmer make it to 2010 with Mike DeBoard coaching Ryan Mallett? I'm telling you, that could be a deadly, deadly combo. Ryan Mallett was a very, very good college quarterback. We saw that when he went to Arkansas to play with Bobby Petrino. That was a match made in heaven, and Mallett helped Arkansas. Again, Now, Arkansas's best season under Petrino came after he left. It was 2011. That year they went 11-2, and their only 2 losses were to the 2 teams to play for the national title, LSU and Alabama. But they did finish number 5. And in 2010, they did go to the Cotton Bowl, and they finished 10-3 and ranked number 12. And if you guys don't remember, they had arguably the most exciting offensive game in the history of football when they played Auburn. Auburn beat them 65-43. It was 2010, kind of set the stage that the SEC is headed into an offensive era. But they scored top 25 wins over South Carolina and Mississippi State on the road that year, number 6 LSU at home, and should have beaten Ohio State in it wasn't the Cotton Bowl, it was the Sugar Bowl. I'm sorry, I got that mixed up. But Mallett was a very good quarterback, and you wonder, if Fulmer hires Mike DeBoer and Mallett goes to Tennessee, does Tennessee ever fall into the decade of dysfunction in the 2010s? I mean, it's a very, very interesting question to look at, because Ryan Mallett was a very good quarterback, and DeBoer would have done a better job with Crompton than Dave Clawson did. Obviously, if you guys are questioning about Crompton, Ryan Mallett would not have been able to play in 2008. There was the whole, you have to sit out a year when you transfer back there in those days. So that's why the question is, what would Fulmer have done with Jonathan Crompton? Another question, what if Trooper Taylor was promoted to offensive coordinator as Cutcliffe's replacement? Does Ryan Mallett still go to Tennessee? Does Ryan Mallett go to Tennessee then? I mean, these are a lot of questions that are kind of unanswered. I don't think he does. I think Ryan Mallett was looking for the best possible quarterbacks coach, and that was Bobby Petrino at the time, however you feel about it. But we're talking, as I'm talking this through with you guys, a very, very, very strong possibility that Fulmer kind of has a second win because of Mike DeBoer and Ryan Mallett in the 2010s. And in case you guys forgot, the SEC East was really bad after Tim Tebow left Florida in 2009. South Carolina won it with a 9-3 record in 2010. I actually might have even been 8-4 with Steve Spurrier. It was the only time they won the East. That would have been Ryan Mallett's year starting no matter what. Had he been at Tennessee with Mike DeBoer, it would have been the peak Mallett year. Tennessee went 6-7 that year. That was the 13 men on the field penalty year with LSU. I'm telling you guys right now, if Ryan Mallett is starting that year and Mike DeBoer's running the offense and Fulmer's still head coach, they probably win the East. They probably win the East. Now, they probably lose to Auburn. Don't get me wrong. They probably lose to Auburn because Cam Newton is having his Heisman year at Auburn in the SEC championship that year. But Tennessee is still staying afloat and showing that they're not falling off, and then they probably are still able to recruit at a high level, maybe even a higher level at this point. Because remember, Georgia was 6-6 in 2009 and 2010. That would have been the time for Fulmer to be able to have the second win, because Tennessee is at its best when Georgia's at its worst, because they can pluck talent out of Georgia. So if Tennessee stayed afloat in 2008 and 2009 and had a very good year with Ryan Mallett in 2010 winning the East, I think at that point you might see Tennessee going back to what they were doing in the 90s, which is just poaching the best talent possible right out of the state of Georgia. And then you're talking Fulmer having a second win in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, and maybe getting another national championship in there. Travis, you're trying to be a little sarcastic, Travis, saying he got the most out of Brady in college too. Oh, wait. Well, that wasn't Mike DeBoer's fault, okay? In case you guys forgot, Mike DeBoer, I'm going to pull up his background now, but Mike DeBoer was at the Michigan offensive coordinator from 97 to 99. And in 99, had Lloyd Carr not forced Drew Henson on Mike DeBoer when Brady was clearly the better quarterback at that time, Michigan probably goes undefeated and wins the national championship that year. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. The 2 games they lost because they were alternating quarterbacks and Drew Henson dug a big hole and Tom Brady had to bring it back both times. In 97, you're conveniently ignoring, Travis, that in 97 as offensive coordinator with Brian Griese at quarterback, Mike DeBoer helped Michigan win a national title and propel Brian Griese into an NFL draft pick, which he was not an NFL draft caliber player. Just sorry, he wasn't. And again, go back and look at what he did with Josh Dobbs at Tennessee. I mean, again, Josh Dobbs had as much to do with that as Mike DeBoer himself. Mike DeBoer did fail as a head coach at Central Michigan from 2000 to 2003. But I'm going to be honest with you. Maybe the reason he failed as a head coach at Central Michigan was because his offensive coordinator, was none other than Butch Jones. Yep, that guy. That guy was his offensive coach. So maybe, and then, of course, he went to work under Butch Jones years later. Oh, and also Mike DeBoer came back to Michigan in 2006 and 2007, and that's when Michigan had their revitalization from the 7-5 year in 2005, and then went 11-0 for the first 11 games of 2006 and finished 11-2, having just barely lost to Ohio State, who was undefeated that year. So I think you're underselling how well this could have worked out had Mike DeBoer gone to Tennessee. He was running the pro style. He would have been a perfect fit for Fulmer's system. He coached tight ends. It was everything you could want, honestly, at the moment. And when Mike DeBoer left and went to Indiana, when he left Tennessee and went there in 2017, Tennessee fell off. So this is a big what if. What if Tennessee hires Mike DeBoer as offensive coordinator instead of Dave Clawson? What if Ryan Mallett ends up at Tennessee? What happens with the program then, particularly with Georgia falling apart during that middle period under Mark Richt? They had like a renaissance in the mid 2010s, but they were bad in 2000. They were bad after Stafford left, and they were bad in 2009 and 2010 because of that. And that falling off could have really, really helped Tennessee kind of reach another level again under Georgia. So you really have to wonder, Mike, if this is just one of the biggest questions out there. What if Philip Fulmer had hired Mike DeBoer as his offensive coordinator in 2007 after David Cutcliffe left? So it's kind of a very intriguing thing to think about. And that's where Ryan Mallett's connection to Tennessee comes in. But again, we are all thinking about Ryan Mallett. It's a very tragic story. He was a pleasure to watch in college football. It's just a really, really, really sad story. So again, our thoughts and prayers are all with Ryan Mallett's family, and just wanted to bring that up. When we come back, Fred White will be here. We have a few interesting things to talk about with Fred, and it involves Joe Milton and him being at the Manning camp and an anonymous coach taking a bit of a shot at him. I'll talk about that in 2 minutes. We'll be right back.
And Craving Wings South North Shore location, where we've heard people say that you can get the best wings in East Tennessee. Pero ¿quién es este? El número 87, Jacob Warren.
I'll just do 6 on my sauce 87, please.
Imposible, señorita. Dale 6 más. Look at these wings. Perfectas, deliciosas, fantásticas.
Man, I don't know what you're saying, but it sounds awesome. How do you say fresh, never frozen in Spanish?
Frescas, nunca congeladas. Make your way to Craving Wings and get you 6 más.
But what was funny about Cadis, we were a full continuum of care at that time. We had detox, we had inpatient, we had outpatient. So we were doing a lot of the things that we do now. But now we just do them so much better. It's really a simple program, but we're complicated people. I am what I am, and now I got to do something about it.
You can take your life back. Call Cadis today.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Our family has been creating jewelry since 1986, each piece unique with a story all its own. I'm Rick Terry with Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. I'm a jeweler, and I want to be your jeweler. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler. My family and staff look forward to serving you. So please come see us. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street, right next to the Tennessee Theater.
Welcome back to Off the Hook Sports. Caleb Calhoun here. I'm going to take a look at y'all's message boards real quick. Travis, any friend of Lyle is no friend of mine. Okay, you know, the coaching fraternity, a lot of people are connected with a lot of people. And Rocky Top Tom, this is great, and you're probably not lying. Can you really even refer to Butch as an offensive coordinator? I think of him more of just a bump on a pickle, wearing a headset and calling random plays. Well played, well played. I mean, again, this is probably why Mike DeBoer didn't work out as a head coach, because he had Butch coaching under him. Mr. Jones, Tom Brady, Tuck Rule, and Goodell cheating Pats are the only reason he ever won anything in the NFL. No, that's not. Okay, yes, did Tom Brady do a little shady stuff? Yes, a lot of shady stuff. Yes, but okay, he still was a very, very successful quarterback. Not the only reason he won anything. Still going, Mr. Jones. Peyton knows if Pete Rose isn't in the Hall of Fame, Tom Brady shouldn't be in either. Cheaters never win unless they cheat. Okay, not true. A lot of times cheaters just enhance what they were already good at. And sometimes people cheat to even the playing field. It just kind of depends on the situation. Tom Brady's cheating was it cheating? Yes. Should it keep him out of the Hall of Fame? No. Deflating footballs and Spygate was more Bill Belichick's thing. I'm not saying, look, there was clearly more going on with New England than other schools, but that's just kind of, come on, guys. And yes, the fumble was a little intriguing. Going to bring in Fred White here. Fred, thanks for joining the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Caleb. How you doing today?
Oh, pretty good. Just trying to chug along while Dave gets to chill on the beach. And
well, when he comes back, he might be sunburned.
That is true. And Dave gets very, very red. Fred, I'm glad I have you here because I actually wanted to quickly dive in. I don't know if you saw this, but Lindy's came out with their preseason magazine recently, and they do their anonymous coaches speaking on programs. And an anonymous coach speaking on Tennessee wouldn't put his name to it, basically said Josh Heupel was lucky because Jeremy Pruitt found Hooker a diamond in the rough. And then he said, quote, Joe Milton is not the guy. They've got to find somebody else. With Milton, it'll be hard to replicate offensively what they did last year. What are your thoughts on an anonymous coach saying that?
You know, that anonymous coach probably came from Michigan. But
never thought of that.
Because he left Michigan. But I've watched Joe over the years, and I think he did a really good job in that Clemson game and not having the top two receivers. And I know that's just one game, but from what I've heard, he did a really good job down at the Peyton Manning camp, and people came away impressed with him. So sometimes you will have a hater, and then, just because one person said something don't mean nothing. It don't mean a thing at all. So I'm not really worried about what anyone says. Let's see what happens.
And oftentimes when coaches feel that way about a quarterback they've seen or may have worked with that didn't work out, it may work out elsewhere. Couldn't that just be a reflection negatively on that coach that maybe they didn't know how to tailor quarterback skills?
That also is another part of it, yes. Just because you look at a guy, a good coach will make an average player good and a good player great. And a great player is just going to be a great player regardless. But your coaching style and what you teach, I can go back to every position coach is different, and depending on your client, the guys that you have in your room. Like if you're a quarterback coach, and you have guys and you're a quarterback guy that's what you do. You know how to make them better. You don't just say, "Hey, this is my way of doing everything, and this is the only way it's going to be done." Sometimes you got to tailor it to how that kid is or what that kid does. I learned that from being a coach. Coached at CAK High School in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I had guys who were completely different type of players. Some that could only play zone, some could play man. But I had to learn how to figure out which way was best to teach that kid because each one is different. And just because Hendon Hooker did it this way, Joe may not do it that way. And Joe may be better doing it in another way. But I hate the fact that these guys always want to come out and say they want to be anonymous. They don't want you to know who it was. Hey, man, if you say something, stand on it. Plain and simple. Stand on it.
Yeah, it's like it reminds me of the NFL draft when all these anonymous scouts will say stuff, and it's just like they're willingly hurting a player's draft stock, and sometimes maybe even hurting their future and they won't even put their name on it when they say it. A lot of times.
Yeah. And that's a problem to me. That's the Skip Bayless that's the Skip Bayless situations I hate having to see. I remember a few years ago when Skip Bayless talked so bad about LeBron James in the championship game against Dallas, and I remember Mark Cuban going on there and roasting him, just kind of like, you don't know what you're talking about because you didn't play the game. You understand it from a different point of view. You don't understand it from looking at it. You don't understand it from playing it.
I actually remember that very well. Yeah, and I think Skip Bayless learned the hard way because I think he crossed a couple of lines with Shannon Sharp that, I think he kind of learned that maybe he needs, maybe don't trash a Hall of Fame athlete's career to his face.
Yeah, that was, I couldn't understand why he didn't. And that's the thing for me. Like, you talk about it like you actually did it yourself.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, what's your credibility? Just tell me what your credibility is to be able to tell that guy he didn't have a good career.
Yeah.
Really? I mean,
exactly. Getting to so going back to Milton, it's funny you brought him up at the Manning camp last weekend. Caleb Jaru and I were on Monday talking about this, and I'm just curious, what are some things you think he could have picked up at the Manning camp? Because we do know Josh Heupel's offense is very different from anything Peyton Manning himself played in. Where shorter drops, kind of quick, get rid of the ball quickly, not really going through reads as much. So what are some things Joe Milton could have picked up from Peyton Manning, or any of the Mannings for that matter, when he was at the Manning?
I mean, for one, technique. That's one thing that never changes. You can always get better at that, regardless of what offense you run. It's your technique. It's how you throw the ball, how you position your foot, your follow through. What do you see? What are you reading? Now, if you're going to talk about getting better with Peyton Manning, the one thing Peyton knew how to do was read defenses. Regardless of what play you were running, he knew how to do that. And if you can get that information from Peyton Manning and understand how he read defenses, understand how you can hold a safety or hold a corner or hold a linebacker for the short route when he wants that one behind him, those type of things. Those are things that you get, to see with Peyton Manning and learn from him. That's like learning from Tom Brady. Like, they know how to manipulate defenses when they drop back. And that's something that you can do. That's, that's something that you want if you're a quarterback. Because if you don't know how to read, one prime example, Baker Mayfield didn't know how to read defenses when he got to the NFL, and it showed. He's kind of still trying to learn it now, but he didn't know how to read defenses when he got to the NFL. That's why he didn't do very well. I mean, that's something that you can never take a back seat to, or you got to be able to understand those things. That's part of your technique and your preparation as well.
Right.
And who better to learn that from than Peyton?
That's very true. You also dropped he who must not be named Tom Brady. I don't know if you noticed the message board on the right is for some reason not fans of Tom Brady. So yeah,
they just might.
I mean, I still maintain. I think you might like the reason, because people were trying to say they were trying to make fun of him and Mike DeBoer underachieving at Michigan, but like, okay, if Michigan had started Tom Brady the whole year in 1999 instead of that Drew Henson Tom Brady thing, they'd probably win the national title, don't they? That season.
I don't know. What year was that?
That was 99.
I don't know if they won the national championship.
You don't think they win the national title?
No.
But they would have at least gotten there.
Because they're a Big Ten team, they may have possibly gone undefeated and still would have got their ass whooped in the championship game. Florida State was going to whoop them anyway. So
yeah,
they weren't on the same level with those guys.
Yeah, that was that. Because I remember I remember after you guys beat Florida State in 99 or in 98, I remember Bobby Bowden kind of saying, well, we were expected 99 to be our year anyway. For Florida State, it was like them being in the title game, they thought they were there a year early because they knew 99 was their year.
Yeah, that's what they felt like, and it was. They won a national championship in 99. I don't think anybody would have beat them. And we shot ourselves in the foot against Arkansas and Florida. So I think those two losses for us sealed the deal. But if we win Arkansas game and go to the SEC championship, we're probably back in the championship game again. So Michigan, there's a lot of ifs. If, I don't put anything on ifs. He had a great career in the NFL, and whatever happened to him in college happened to him in college. That's right. I don't see him. I didn't think he was a great quarterback in college. I think he became one the way he prepared behind a all-pro quarterback in New England. I mean, he didn't walk into a situation where he had to start at all, for some years. You had Drew Bledsoe sitting there, was one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game too. So he went into a situation where a guy was already a top quarterback, but in order to beat him, you got to go out there and do everything right. The little things count more than anything.
Yep, very true. So sticking with this, with Heupel's, do you think there's going to be a change in Heupel's philosophy? I don't mean like a dramatic change. I mean, do you think he's going to do some things a little bit different this year because of what Joe Milton can do versus what Hendon Hooker could do?
Yeah, I don't think Josh is one of those guys who's this is my way or the highway type of coach. I think he figures out what he has best and what best assets he has for his team, and that's it. I think that's one of the things that made Hendon Hooker better. I think having Josh made Hendon better. And I think they both kind of benefited from having each other on, being around each other, and one being the other, I think that worked very well. I think Heupel looks at his guy and says, this is what he has, this is what I can do with him, and this is what we're going to do. Not, this is my system, and this is how it has to be done, and that's it. It's different. I don't think Joe Milton is the same type of athlete when it comes to running the ball as Hendon Hooker is, in my opinion. I think he could run the ball. I think he very well could. He's a big guy, tough, strong, but he's not as elusive as Hendon Hooker. So arm strength, I think he has more arm strength than probably has the best arm strength of any quarterback in college football right now, and some guys in the NFL. But you got to use his best attributes. That's like I was saying when I coach in high school football and even any sport. You take the best attributes of that kid and you try to just hone in on that skill, as opposed to just saying, okay, this is my way. He can't do it that way, then, well, that's it. No, some guys don't know how to bump and run. Some guys don't know how to play off man. Some guys don't know how to read a whole field. You look at what Lane Kiffin did with Compton. Before Lane Kiffin came, Compton was, kind of an average quarterback. When Kiffin came, he became a really good quarterback that year. But one of the things they did was cut half the field off for him. So all his reads were on one side of the field instead of the entire field. But that's something that Lane Kiffin figured out and understood about him. And it made him a better quarterback. And then once he learned how to do half the field, he had understood how to read the entire field from that point on. I think he had a really good season that year just because of that. But you got to be, as a coach, you have to be able to recognize those things about your players because they're not all the same. They don't all have the same skills. So.
Yeah, I agree. And I noticed with Heupel, he does that too with, 2 years ago, Cedric Tillman was the go-to guy. Wideout, you relied on him a lot. Tillman gets hurt. Last year, he turns more towards the slot, Jalen Hyatt. And so, yeah, I've seen that a lot. Would you say it's funny you brought up Compton. Would you say that was the issue with when Dave Clawson was there at Tennessee in 2008? He tried to force his offense on a team that really did not fit that offense at all.
Absolutely. You can't – I don't agree with just saying, this is my system and that's it. What do you mean, this is my system and that's it? I got to fit in your system and that's all? That means you're very limited as a coach. I don't know who told you was a great coach, but you're not. Maybe back in the day when it was 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but no. In today's game, if you don't understand how to evolve with your players, you're not going to be around long. It's just, it is what it is. My way to highway type of coaching is obsolete.
Yeah, it reminds me of, it's funny you bring it up, it reminds me of whatever we think about him as a human, which we can go a lot of ways with that, but when Urban Meyer was at Florida, his first national title, Chris Leak wasn't necessarily the best fit for his system, but he tailored his spread offense to fit Chris Leak, and that's how they won the national title that year.
And that's why they won a national championship. He did the same thing with Tim Tebow. And that's why they won a national championship. Those are the things you do as a coach. If you're supposed to be a good coach, you know how to adapt to your players as well. That, all right, this is my way. Hey, man, you need to go somewhere. That'll cost you some players in recruiting. If that's the way you coach nowadays, it's going to cost you some players in recruiting. It'll make you lose a guy like a Von Bell. It'll make you lose a guy like a Jalen Ramsey that could come to your school and but that's not the way you want to coach him. You know what I mean? Those guys are great athletes and showing it on the next level as well. You can't just be a system guy. You know what I mean? Sometimes the athletic ability has to be something that just oozes out.
I'm hearing that you may have just taken a shot at Derek Dooley by those two names right there, Von Bell and Jalen Ramsey.
I'll take a shot and I'll call him out. Yeah, Derek Dooley. Absolutely. I don't like Derek Dooley very much. So it is what it is. And I say something, I stand on it. I don't need to be anonymous. I'll say it and I said it. Yeah, I said it.
Fred, I know you got to go towards the end of the month, but I really appreciate you jumping in. How can people get in touch with you? You
know what? They can give me a phone call at 770-381-0367, or they can go online and we're online at Fred White Allstate. You can find us on all social media platforms under Fred White Allstate as well. Give us a call. Check us out. We'd love to be able to help you out with your recruiting. So with your insurances, your auto, life insurance, and home insurance as well. We also do business insurance as well as commercial auto. So we have a full array of insurance that we can sell you, and we would love to be able to help you out. And one thing we will do, like I just said, we will stand on it.
Fred, thanks a lot. One last question, because Dave's not here. Because I thought about this recently, but the year you first arrived at Tennessee was the year that Goody Mob dropped Soul Food, and the year before, Outkast had dropped Southern Playlist of Cadillac Music. Now, in the 2000s, Outkast was a bigger deal. Who was more famous in the moment, Outkast or Goody Mob for Georgia kids? It was still Outkast.
They were the first ones to break the mold to be mainstream. Outkast is still the one. I love Goody Mob. Now, don't get me wrong. There's no group, period, better than Outkast, in my opinion. Rap group.
I agree.
Wu-Tang Clan will be a close second, but Outkast is it. Andre 3000 and Big Boy, baby.
Yeah, I agree on the talent level. They're second to none. See, I'm a little bit younger, so I kind of paid attention in the early 2000s. So I was a Ludacris T.I. guy. But
you don't get Ludacris and T.I. without Outkast.
No, that's true.
They were the first.
That is true.
They made Atlanta. We've had plenty of rappers before Outkast, but Outkast made it big. They were the first ones from Georgia that everybody knows. So
yep. And that year,
wouldn't know who T.I. was or Ludacris without them.
Right. No, yeah, I appreciate them, and I had their newer albums in the 2000s that were good. You know, I had Stinkonia and Secret Box Below, but I didn't know much about early Outkast because I was just so young at the time. But
man, listen, Southern Playlist of Cadillac Funky Music is one of the most. It is an instant classic. You need to Google it and just.
Oh, I've listened to it retroactively. I have. Just like I watched a lot of Tennessee football highlights from the early 90s, even though I wasn't a fan, I can retroactively analyze things and enjoy it. So
yes. I see Outkast guys all the time. I ran into Andre 3000 at the mall one time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, man.
I always hear that rumor that Atlanta's like
it's like that. It is.
It's like a small town almost, even though it's a big city.
It is. Yeah, I ran into if you're in the city of Atlanta. In the downtown Atlanta area, anywhere around there, you'll run into a lot of guys. You'll run into a lot of people, actors, movie stars, artists, all kind of stuff. You see everybody here.
Wow,
it's like the music capital of the South.
Yeah, on a smaller scale, Memphis has a lot of that too, but we're not as big as Atlanta, obviously. But
yeah, we're a little bit bigger.
Yeah. Hey, we started all the music though. It started with 8 Ball MJG first.
I get it. 8 Ball MJG was good. Yeah, I got a lot of love and respect for them. If you went to the University of Tennessee and you listen, you know who that is for sure.
Yeah. All right, Fred. I know I took a little bit too much of your time on that, but thanks. I really appreciate you coming on, and have a great rest of your week. And let's troll Dave for not being here next week.
Yeah. Let's get on it, man. Let's get on him. Let him know he went to the beach and left us out here in this working world. So
yes,
I hope he's enjoying himself.
I hope he gets so red. I'm sorry. I'm going to hell. Have a good one, Fred.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too.
Yep.
That was Fred White, Portions of the program are brought to you by Craft Treats. CraftTreats.com is your home for the best pet treats in the world. They even have CBD infused treats that can minimize your pet's digestive, arthritic, or anxiety issues. Go to CraftTreats.com. When we come back, we got a little more national news to talk about. Got a recent Paul Finebaum interview where he said some intriguing things that I want to dive into. And what should the NCAA do with their sports betting rules? That's a really, really interesting debate. I know some people on this message board and some people in our community aren't a fan of sports betting in general. So this will kind of be intriguing to touch on. Talk about both of those when we come back. 2 minutes.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center. Ah.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Our family has been creating one-of-a-kind pieces of jewelry in West Knoxville since 1986. Each piece is a combination of unique processes that bring your idea to life. Every day in our shop, a truly special item with a story all its own is being manufactured in our facility, bringing the history and family sentiment into a whole new generation of life. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler, a title that we value and respect. Because to me, being a jeweler and owning a jewelry store are not the same thing. I'm Rick Terry. I'm a jeweler, and we want to be your jeweler. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street right next to the Tennessee Theater.
When you want a hard cider that's easy to enjoy, one that's crafted to perfection, you need Tennessee Cider Company. Some say it's the signature cider of the South. Others say it's the cure to your craving. They all say you'll savor every sip. With a selection of ciders free to sample, all it takes is one taste. Visit tncidercompany.com for more information, as well as to shop our ciders and merchandise online. Thirsty yet? Doors open at 10 a.m.
Welcome back, everybody, to the show. There are a couple of things I want to point out. We're going to dive in a little bit more to this tomorrow, but congratulations to Tennessee for finishing 6th in the Directors' Cup standings this year. We talked a lot about their Vols athletic success. It's their best finish ever. Also, there's some intriguing news about Tennessee baseball landing NC State transfer catcher Cannon Peebles, who has committed the day Chase Birds entered the portal, too. Big news for Tennessee. A catcher is more important than a pitcher for successful pitching. I learned that a long time ago. Before I move on to the message boards a little bit, Travis saying it's Wu-Tang. Mr. Jones drops Vanilla Ice. Mr. Jones, I'm with you. Okay, so I mentioned 8-Ball and MJG, but yes, I'm a 3-6 Mafia fan too. That was my era of listening to hip-hop. I was a huge 3-6 fan. They laid the foundation for what Memphis hip-hop is right now, which Memphis is having a huge resurgence with Yo Gotti, Moneybagg Yo, Glorilla. You've got Key Glock. Rest in peace, Young Dolph. That was obviously big. That all started with 3-6. So yeah, I'm not. Trust me, I was a huge fan of them too. Diving in, let's keep moving on. Paul Finebaum was joining Greg McElroy and Cole Kublik the other day. He was on McElroy and Kublik in the morning. And he talked about a couple of interesting things. And they're kind of connected, believe it or not, if you really think about that. The first was he was kind of taking a shot at the NCAA. And he pretty much said what we all agree, which is he said there's, quote, no hope for integrity inside college athletics. I'm going to read a quote real quickly from Paul Finebaum, where he says there is simply nothing anybody can do right now or probably ever again to maintain a semblance of integrity in intercollegiate athletics. That's over. He was talking about NIL and the transfer portal and things like that, but he suggested to stop some of the problems, they should put stricter guidelines in terms of when and where. And when you talk about players transferring, there should be some sort of stricter guidelines on when and where they could transfer. I'm not so sure about that. I'm a little bit mixed on that. But that's a fair debate. Maybe say if you want to transfer, the school can block your transfer to other schools, but you can still go to those schools, but you still have to sit out a year. Now, if you graduate, you can just transfer anywhere. There's a way to talk about that, but it's kind of intriguing. But then he said, I don't think there's any help for, this is a quote from Finebaum, I don't think there's any help for NIL. I am bone weary of talking about congressional intervention. I simply don't believe that, and I don't think it's coming anytime soon. I agree with Paul Finebaum. I'm actually going to bring this up. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, Congress and the government shouldn't get involved in anything. Stay out of everything's business. No, it depends on the situation. There's sometimes I think government regulation is necessary and government involvement is necessary. And there's sometimes I think it's not. I think it's silly and way too ideological to just be on a principle of reflexively always bad. It depends on what is needed. I think NIL, though, is one that I just don't think there's any fair way for the federal government to regulate this. I don't. I'm sorry. And the reason I don't think that is because there's no way for the federal government to regulate NIL. Now, somebody on the message board suggest this to me and tell me, but I don't think there's any way for the federal government to regulate it that doesn't involve taking money out of the hands of the student athletes and putting it back into the hands of the schools, the administrators, the boosters that they generate all that revenue for in the first place. I don't think it's possible, quite honestly. I think NIL is here to stay. And I think that, again, whether or not you're for or against NIL, if you want Washington to regulate it, you have to come up with a solution to me where the regulation won't result in the money that's going to these players going back into the hands of the coaches, the schools, the NCAA, and people like that. And if you can't figure that out, don't come to me for NIL regulation. Because the fact of the matter is the cat's out of the bag at this point. And what's going to happen long term is money is going to transfer from the NIL is going to take money away from long term coaches, NCAA officials, schools, things like that. They're all still going to be handsomely paid, don't get me wrong. But a lot of that money is cobbled together through what the boosters prop up. And the boosters are now going to be reserving that money for players. This is why, as Josh Pate talked about the other day, there's going to be a Moneyball era for coaches. There's going to be people are going to start looking more for coaches they can get on a bargain. There's not going to be there's going to be a lot more pressure on buyouts and things like that with NIL. You're not just going to be able to get a coach and open a dump truck of cash and say, hey, if it doesn't work out, I'll just pay the buyout and call it a day, because that money needs to go to the players. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Coaches were making way too much money for falling on their face too many times. We just had Fred on. I'm pretty sure Fred feels that Derek Dooley got way too much money to walk away from his job after 2012. Okay, when he was fired. I mean, that's just how it goes. So I would say that, again, there's two questions: liking NIL or not liking NIL. That's over. That debate's over. NIL's here. So you can't not like it. The second question becomes regulating it somehow. And again, here's the problem with college football. The revenue that the schools generate, not booster based, but the schools themselves generate, that the players generate for the school, is used to fund all the other non-revenue producing sports programs. This is why you can't have players be employees as much, because that money that the schools would be paying them needs to go to other programs. This is where NIL was the best compromise. So if you're going to have any regulation on whether or not you're going to pay them, you're going to regulate NIL, anything like that, you got to figure out two things. I take this back. You got to figure out, one, how this money does it, how you can keep this money that they're getting now from going back into the hands of the administrators, the coaches, and the NCAA. And you got to figure out, two, if any regulation you do will prevent the football program from still generating the necessary revenue to support the non-revenue producing sports, which is crucial for Title IX's sake. There's just no way you can regulate it without compromising one of those two things. I just don't see how it's possible. If somebody has an idea, come to me. But one thing I don't want to hear is complaints about poaching players in the transfer portal or the idea of tampering or whether or not you can stop that. I don't care if they're tampering. Coaches are tampered with all the time. How often are coaches? Back in the day, this is for people who think back in the day. So back in the day, coaches used to get hired in January, maybe even February. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I believe Nick Saban was hired in January of 2007, by the way. So don't quote me on that, but that used to be par for the course. Now coaches are hired the day after their last regular season game. And oftentimes before they may have a conference championship game, they may have a bowl game. It's in the season when they're talking to these other schools if they're looking at another school. How are you going to say that coaches can do that, but then say you can't reach out to players who are playing at other schools who may look to transfer? That's just not fair. That's not a fair way to look at it. So I honestly believe that NIL and the transfer portal, for the most part, I don't think they need to be touched. If anything, the only thing you need to do is create a work-life balance for the coaches to say that they can't talk to players around certain times, so no coach feels pressure to have to do it all the time. It's the only way I'd go with it, quite honestly. Now, Finebaum also had a very intriguing take about one Jeremy Pruitt. And Finebaum said he doesn't see it being a long time before Pruitt works again. According to Finebaum, this is based on the Tennessee case with the NCAA, which, by the way, still has not been resolved. He said it came down to litigation. Quote, ultimately, it came down to litigation, and the NCAA started losing in court. Same reason we got in NIL, and they started losing on NCAA enforcement cases too. So the NCAA tried to come up with this IARP and all these other means, and they simply don't work. And I think the most interesting case left on the board is Tennessee. And I think all these indications are that Tennessee will come out of whatever it's been in better off. Finebaum later went on to say, I wouldn't be surprised to see Jeremy Pruitt on a campus near you as an analyst within weeks, because I think ultimately he'll be able to move back to the field as a coach, because I think that's where we are right now. And it's a combination of not only what the organization and how they feel, and I'm referring to the NCAA, but it's everyone else. The people that have the power are the conference commissioners, and they just have too much else on the plate right now to be outraged by transgressions off the field. What he's really talking about here is what's really a sticking point for Tennessee was what we believe was their involvement that they're being held accountable for, and they don't want the punishments, and also Jeremy Pruitt's show calls. And the show calls doesn't seem like it's going to be that serious because of NIL, and the conference commissioners have too much pull to make it serious. If Jeremy Pruitt's on the sidelines next year, though, that's crazy. That's crazy, and it's largely crazy because Donnie Tyndall still has a show calls for basketball right now that started 4 years before Jeremy Pruitt was hired, which is just freaking insane. But he's probably not lying. And also with Donnie Tyndall, it was an academic fraud case, which honestly is more egregious than paying players, given their worth and things like that. I got to be honest. I think an academic fraud case. I know these players are athletes first, and we got to stop lying, but that doesn't mean academic fraud is okay. That's one that I do think you should have somewhat of a standard for. But I would argue that, look, I'd hire Jeremy Pruitt in a heartbeat as a defensive coach in a heartbeat. Guy can coach ball. Okay, he knows defense well, and he's a great evaluator of talent. Now, in terms of offense, in terms of the way he goes about things, different story. Micromanages way too much, tries to control way too much, and also, I mean, did not hire the right offenses for what he was trying to do. But he is a great identifier of talent. Josh Heupel's success early doesn't happen if Jeremy Pruitt doesn't identify the right players to go play for him. And again, as we mentioned in the last segment with Fred White, finding Hendon Hooker out of the blue, diamond in the rough, nobody saw coming. You got to give Jeremy Pruitt credit for that. And the Duke can scout talent, and so I got to say I agree with Finebaum. I think Pruitt will be on the field pretty soon. So interesting stuff from Paul Finebaum. I encourage you guys all to go check out it. It's again, it's with Greg McElroy and Cole Kublik. The show is McElroy and Kublik in the morning. And I know he talks about how integrity can't be, there's no hope for it. I say, who cares? It's entertaining. Are you not entertained? So that's where I would go with it. Going to the message boards real quick before we get to the last point. A few interesting takes. Back to the music talk. This is kind of funny. Can Tennessee... Oh, Thomas Doe has a great question. Can Tennessee beat Georgia this season in football? Yes, they can. They are a trap game for Georgia. I would say watch out because there's a very, very, very good chance they do some real dangerous work on Georgia this year. They get Georgia at a good time. Mr. Jones, we're talking about music artists, and Mr. Jones says Ja Morant. Well played. D says Zeppelin. D, you can save your classic rock talk for when Dave gets back on the show. All of you guys born in 1843 or whenever. Sorry. I'm sorry. Rocky Top Tom, I know you're not an NIL fan, but it is what it is. A great quote by D here, actually. This is interesting. Paul Bear Bryant said, quote, he never paid a player more than the going rate. Integrity was out the window before then. Yeah, integrity's never really been in college sports. So this idea that it's ever been on the up and up is just laughable. Okay, this was a feel-good thing you guys all told yourselves, that it was about academics and the scholarship and the pageantry. No, it was about playing football and trying to get to the NFL. And if people could get paid, they were going to do it. Mr. Jones says NIL sets its own market as long as they pay the taxes on it to the government, don't care. Nope, that's a good point. Rocky Top Tom, very good point, followed up. There's no way for either Congress or the NCAA to regulate any of this. Yes, schools are paying kids, but you don't institutionalize it. You punish it when it's discovered. Yeah, but Rocky Top Tom, what you're doing at that point is you're just allowing for a system where you can lie to yourself because you knew it was happening and you just didn't want to. You wanted to purposely turn a blind eye if that's how it was happening. We all knew it was going on. This way you don't have to feel any sort of cheating you don't have to feel any sort of type of way when it's happening. And it's not really institutionalized. I would argue it's the opposite of institutionalized, because if it was institutionalized, the NCAA and Congress and everybody would get involved and set something up. No, it's just people are paying players and giving them endorsement deals. And by the way, we're blaming the schools in the NCAA. Has nothing to do with that, Rocky Top Tom. This was done by the Supreme Court, which literally said it's unconstitutional for players to not be allowed to make money off their name, image, and likeness. So, and unless you're going to blame, if you're going to blame anything, you got to blame the Constitution at this point, because it violates labor laws that were held up. And so there's no other area of American society that's like this. So I just don't think that no one's really at fault for NIL existing. If anything, the NCAA is just at fault for not getting out ahead of it. Mr. Jones, great take here. Name, image, and likeness will be the end of the NCAA, who never could accomplish anything. Well played. And Mr. Jones also suggests Jeremy Pruitt plays Matthew McConaughey. Aight. And Rocky Top Tom, Jeremy Pruitt belongs on a football. Jeremy Pruitt has as much business being allowed back on a football field as politicians do teaching ethics classes. Okay, well, believe it or not, I think a lot of politicians do teach ethics classes. I could be wrong on that, but a lot of them are professors on the side. So it's very, very, very intriguing. All right. Before we get going, portions of the program are brought to you by Zen Sports. Zen Sports is the new sports book in Tennessee, revolutionizing the way you earn sports betting rewards. That means no more deposit bonuses that turn into deposit nightmares. On Zen Sports, what you see is what you get. And with their cash rewards program, you get a lot of cash. For a welcome bonus, earn an unlimited 5% cash back on your betting volume for your first 15 days when you sign up with the code HOOKED. That's right, unlimited 5% cash back. Keep betting and keep earning, with up to 3% cash back on your betting volume every month after that. And refer friends to earn a percentage of their betting volume as cash rewards too. Zen Sports is bringing the cash back to Tennessee. So if you bet big on sports, you want to be betting on Zen Sports. Zen Sports betting just got better. And speaking of betting, before we get there, I will answer this question. Rocky Top Tom, does Tennessee get Cam Franklin after losing out on William Nwaneri? Thoughts, anyone? I do believe Tennessee is going to get Cam Franklin. I do believe that. That's what all signs point to. So but again, we're not. Edge rusher is a little bit difficult to project because Tennessee actually does have pretty good edge rushers. So it's kind of a question on what's going to happen. Did they lose out on William Nwaneri? I think Nwaneri is still, his recruitment is still open. I didn't think Tennessee was going to lose out on him. Let me look it up. I don't think he's committed anywhere yet. So if there's any news on that, let me know. I'm not so sure that. I think he's still available though. Okay, so moving on. The NCAA, speaking of gambling, CBS Sports article has come out. They did some good investigative work. Dennis Dodd, who we have criticized here, but he did good work here. He says the NCAA is struggling with legal sports betting. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble talking. The NCAA struggles with legal sports betting landscape continues as plenty of uncertainty remain. So the NCAA, with the proliferation of legal sports gambling across the country, is having a hard time dealing with and figuring out how to regulate this. So as we all know, Alabama baseball coach Brad Bohannon was fired back in April after it pretty much came out that he bet on his own team. It was suspicious betting activity. We all believe he bet on his own team. There was an unusually high bet placed on a certain game, and he unusually didn't start his ace that game. This was just very, very, very intriguing, set off enough alerts that they pulled betting. Now, this is going to be a big issue. So the question is that the NCAA is trying to figure out, is that evidence of a growing problem, or is this proof that the NCAA's regulations have worked? So right now, there's a long-standing rule at the NCAA that employees, coaches, administrators, and athletes cannot wager on any sport, amateur, pro, or college, in which the association sponsors a championship. So basically, NCAA people cannot bet on NCAA events. Period. End of story. That's just how it goes. Now, Matt Holt, president of U.S. Integrity, says that needs to be reconsidered. He says, at the end of the day, you're not likely really having any influence. Why can't a baseball player at LSU bet on a basketball game involving the University of Michigan? So here's my question for the message board. Should NCAA people be allowed, say an NCAA football player, should they be allowed to bet on an NCAA basketball game? Should the standard be, if you are an NCAA athlete, you can't bet on any NCAA event, period, of the story? You can't bet on any NCAA event involving your school. You can't bet on any NCAA event involving your sport. You only can't bet on NCAA events involving your school or your sport, or you can just bet on whatever you want. Now, my standard is, I'm just going to be honest, if you're an NCAA athlete, you can't bet on any event, the NCAA. I am pro sports gambling. I am pro legalized sports gambling, but I am very, very strict on betting. And here's why. NCAA athletes, if you guys know how, for those of you who've gone to college, know that athletes hang out in cliques a lot. A lot of football players and basketball players are friends. Basketball players, women's basketball players, basketball players, softball players, baseball players, basketball players. They're all friends with each other. They're all very connected, much more connected than you and I. So I don't think it's, and also many of them play multiple sports sometimes. Because of that, I don't think it's appropriate for them to be able to bet on any of the sports, because they have too much insider information and that can skew the betting lines, which is as bad as betting against yourself in a game and losing on purpose. It's as bad if you look at the natural end result of this. And so I think the best thing for the NCAA to do is actually to keep what they have. And I can't believe I'm giving the NCAA credit for this, but I think this is a good rule. You can't bet, if you're affiliated with the NCAA, you can't bet on anything affiliated with the NCAA. It's just that simple. I think it's way too dangerous. It sets way too dangerous of a precedent, and it opens the floodgates of some really, really, really big issues. In gambling, look, it's insider trading. I'm just going to say what it is. It's insider trading, and this is where Congress should get involved. I don't think Congress should get involved with NIL. I think they should get involved with gambling. Okay, they should be stepping in for these leagues and saying, this will not be tolerated. If you bet on the league you are playing in, you will go to prison. If you bet in the stock market on a business that you run, that's insider trading and you go to prison. should be the exact same for betting on a sport you play or an organization you are a part of in athletics. You should not be allowed to bet on NCAA events if you are an NCAA athlete, if you're an NCAA employee, if you're an NCAA coach, an NCAA administrator, whatever it is, you should not be allowed to bet on that. That is a massive, massive conflict of interest, and it will derail the NCAA. So what I'm saying is they should stick with where they are right now. I don't think the Alabama situation should raise any red flags on them needing to change anything. I argue that that's proof that it worked the way it should have. He was placing bets he shouldn't have placed. The NCAA figured it out. He got fired and he got in trouble. That's just how it went. So I think personally, I just think that you should not be allowed to gamble on sports you play. So a couple of interesting points. Rocket Top Tom, you bring up a great point. You say, so Congress, the people who make money on illegal insider trading, are supposed to regulate sports betting. That's a great point. We all agree it's ridiculous that Congress can insider trade. But that doesn't mean that the laws against insider trading shouldn't exist, which they do have laws against insider trading. So and Gary Harper jumps in. Welcome, Gary Harper. Says, you want Congress to speak out against insider trading? Okay, I get y'all's point. Yes, members of Congress do insider trading, and it's ridiculous, and they shouldn't be allowed to do it. That doesn't mean we should get rid of insider trading laws, though. It was Congress that passed insider trading laws. So, again, they're upholding the laws, it's not for themselves, okay, which is a ethics issue on its own, but that does not mean we should be getting rid of insider trading laws altogether. That would be crazy with the stock market and how things go, okay? So I would say that whatever your feelings on members of Congress are on insider trading and things like that, and of course it's a problem, and I have no problem with trying to call it out everywhere you get, every chance you get. That doesn't mean insider trading laws shouldn't exist, and that doesn't mean there shouldn't be laws against gambling on sports you play, because that is a form of insider trading. It just is. And you guys can't convince me otherwise. There's just no way the sports can't survive if insider trading becomes a part of it. You have to always believe your sport is on the up and up. Okay, 1919 almost derailed baseball. Go back and look it up. The 1919 White Sox threw the World Series, and quite honestly, they had a reasonable point to do it, given how they were getting cheated in their pay by the White Sox owner at the time. That's a different story, but either way, they still almost derailed the sport. So people who cared about the sport, Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who was not the best person in the world, really enforced the gentleman's agreement to keep baseball segregated. So I'm no fan of Kennesaw Mountain Landis, but made the right move to throw them all out and make the stance, this will not be tolerated, because they nearly derailed baseball. And if Babe Ruth doesn't start putting on a show start putting on a show in the 20s, baseball gets derailed. Quite honestly, the sport dies. That's why Pete Rose, the ban, had to be upheld the way it was. I think the NCAA is right with their current ruling right now. I'm totally okay with it. The question is going to become, we all kind of agree that the NCAA as a governing authority is pretty much dying. It's going to be non-existent in a few years. Will the same rule exist with conferences in the future? I think it should. We'll see how it goes. Before we get out of here, I want to go to the message boards one more time. Rocky Top Tom with a great question. Do you think 2,000 years ago the Romans were etching on stone message boards about whether gladiator betting should be regulated? You know, Rocky Top Tom, the Romans were so advanced in so many ways for their time. I bet there was betting on these, and I bet there was some sort of stone arc, whatever you want to call it, that they had the bets on. So betting's very old, okay? Betting's a very, very old job, a very, very old industry. D says gambling in and of itself is wrong. If you're going to make it legal, make it all legal. Laws against gambling were established 5,000 years ago. This is a dead topic. I disagree. You can make things legal and then regulated. I mean, look, alcohol is legal. That doesn't mean people under 18 should drink it or that people should drink and drive. So it's just one of those things. So I disagree on that. Thank you guys all for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. We're doing our best without Dave. We'll have Jaru and hopefully we'll have Jaru on for early segment again tomorrow, and hopefully Josh Ward after that, and then should have Jaru the whole day Friday. So we're chugging along. We're doing our best without Dave. And before I get out of here, portions of the program brought to you by Andy Mason Real Estate. For the best prices and service in real estate in Knoxville, there's just one place, andymasonrealestate.com. Andy and his partners have been in the real estate business for a combined 40 years. They know how the market works and how to save you thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. Andy Mason at andymasonrealestate.com. You guys all have a great day. I appreciate all of you tuning in. We'll be back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. Thanks a lot. This has been This has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports. This is Caleb Calhoun. Thanks a lot, everybody.